Hi everyone, just before we get into this episode of Type 1 I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much for pressing play. I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you do, don't forget to hit subscribe and you'll be notified when new episodes come about. You can find us across podcast land on Spotify, iTunes, all those good places as well. Secondly, anything you hear on this podcast should not be taken as medical advice. I am, of course, not a professional, and you do need to seek advice from your healthcare team before making any changes to your diabetes management. And lastly, if you want to say hello, I do have an Instagram page specifically for the Type 1 podcast. You can find it at Studio Type 1. That's at Studio Type 1, the number, on 1, the number. And you can also come and say hello and follow me on my personal page, which is at Miss Jen Grieves. And all of that will be noted in the episode description. Hi everyone, and welcome to Type 1, a podcast that delves into the obscure, complex and challenging world of life with Type 1 diabetes. I'm Jen Grieves, and each week, with the help of some brilliant guests, I'll be showing that there is no normal when it comes to handling this whopper of a chronic condition, because we're all pretty much figuring out the messiness of day-to-day life with diabetes as we go. And most of all, even though it doesn't always feel like it, we are absolutely not alone. Today's guest is behavioural analyst and health and fitness coach Vanessa Haydock, also known as the Diabetic Health Coach. Born and bred in Lancashire, Vanessa has been living with type 1 diabetes since she was 3 years old. And after a period of what she calls denial in her teens, a retinopathy diagnosis at the age of 18 set Vanessa on a path of change. After studying psychology, human behaviour and fitness, what was one of her greatest setbacks has led to helping hundreds of other people live better with diabetes. Hello, Vanessa. Welcome to Type 1.
Hi, Jen. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for joining me today. You have this absolute wealth of knowledge and understanding and just an incredible story as well. So I'm super grateful to you for joining me today. How is lovely Lancashire?
It's okay. We had some really good weather last week, which seems to have taken a turn for the worse now, but it's usually the case up in the north of England.
Yeah, nothing that you're not used to. I am
That's it.
honorary Yorkshire, so I'm not, I'm not there like ha ha ha. Although I am sat in Spain, so I probably shouldn't
Oh, how's the
say too
weather
much.
in Spain at the minute?
It's actually quite grey, so I'm crawling back here. I am with you, but yeah, I can't complain. That's for sure. So rather than how are you, which is the usual question, I always like to ask people how the diabetes is doing today, just because it's actually quite rare that we get to say something like, oh, I miscalculated my bolus this morning, and someone actually understands what that means. So how
Yeah.
are you, and how is your diabetes doing today?
Yeah, I mean, so far so good,
Oh,
7.2.
look at that.
So yeah, I'm all good at the minute. However, I had my dinner about an hour ago, and quite high in protein, high in fat, and we know what it's like later down the line. That's when it'll start to impact me slightly. So you can already see that it's starting to creep up a little bit.
It's rising a little bit there, yeah.
Yeah, but it'll be
Yeah,
fine. It'll be
it'll
fine.
be
I would
fine.
prefer to be a little bit not higher when I'm on a podcast or anything like that, but I don't want it to go low.
Yeah, I hear you. That's the bit where you get a bit, am I gonna fall over? I mean, I've never fallen over, but that bit where you can't string a thought together and you can't
Yeah,
really tell anyone your own name, let alone like speak on a podcast.
yeah.
That's the thing. That's the thing. But even you saying that, I've eaten this lunch, I've had fats, I've had protein, so I know what's going to happen. I'll get a bit of a delay. Like, even in that one response, you sort of encapsulating there how much there is to deal with and how much is going through
Mhm.
our head, like all day, every day. I've got a
Yeah,
podcast in a minute. I don't want to be too low. And we're just constant, aren't we?
yeah. I mean, like, what did they say? Like, someone with type 1 diabetes makes an average of an extra 180 decisions every single day. And it's so
Yeah.
true. Like, I mean, I've never counted them myself, but if anything, I'd probably say there's probably even more than that because it is literally like all the time I'm thinking, what are my glucose levels? When am I going to go for a walk? How much insulin have I got on board? How much insulin am I going to need for what I'm about to eat? Do I feel low or do I feel high? And it's just constantly, I always say we have a second brain. We've got our
100%.
diabetes brain and we've got our normal brain. And the diabetes brain is always on, switched on, ticking along. Because again, it is one of those where it is a condition that is 24/7,
Yeah,
literally.
100%. Yeah. And is this something you see in your clients in terms of, because I don't know if often I'm aware of all the decisions I'm making because it's just become part of like this other brain that runs all the time. Um, when you, I mean, I'm jumping ahead, but I guess when people are coming to you and they want to work with you, it's because they want to make some changes, and often that is around diabetes management. So do you find that people aren't even kind of aware of how much they're dealing with and how much they're taking on in terms of giving themselves some grace and some compassion for what it is that we are dealing with?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it, Jen? I mean, when it comes to diabetes, it's so different compared to, if, for example, I've got also got underactive thyroid, and what that means is I have to take medication for the rest of my life, which is a tablet in the morning, and then that's it. Don't have to think about it. But with diabetes, it's not the case of, okay, just have this and then you'll be okay. It's, okay, this is what you need to do. And then also this. And it may not actually work. So then you may need to do this. And it's a lot. It is literally, everything just switches. And, in terms of, after receiving a diabetes diagnosis, there's so much that we have to take on board and we need to not necessarily adhere to, but things that we have to put in place just to try and manage it the best we can. And linking in with, again, behavior change. When I was at uni and I was learning about human behavior and behavioral psychology, and they were talking about, habits and building positive behaviors and healthy behaviors. And I'm sat there thinking, wow, why is there nothing like this for people with diabetes? Because we're literally having to participate in so many different habits and behaviors every single day that are not even that easy as well. And what I always say too is, when I'm trying to describe diabetes to people, it's a little bit like you can do everything by the book. You can do everything right, do everything that we're told to do, and still feel like we get it wrong. And it's a little bit like, I always say, it's answering one plus one, writing down two, and then getting it marked and then getting it wrong. That's what it feels like sometimes.
Yeah.
And again, that can have such a big impact on our own motivation. And again, is it any wonder that sometimes it can be a lot to take on? But it is doable. It is, we can push through it. And if anything, it just builds a resilience and makes us so much stronger in general. I always say, like, when it comes to diabetes, it's probably made me the most resilient version of me possible because we're having to just obviously, not necessarily fight it every day, but we're having to do the job of an organ every single day.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
You've got to be an active participant, haven't you?
Hmm.
Otherwise, before long, something will come up, like as in your case and similar in my case, it was a diagnosis of retinopathy that set me on kind of a fork in the road, if you like. So before we get into your story, I'd love to get a little bit of context from you about what it actually is that you do and how you help people, because I know there's different facets. We've already touched on the actual glucose levels and diabetes management. There's a fitness aspect. There's also a mindset aspect, which, personally speaking, has been one of the most important tools outside of the testing and the dosing and the
Hmm.
basic habits that we do have to do. That has
Yeah,
been the key to shift kind of my perspective and my relationship with type 1 diabetes. So for the benefit of people listening, can you tell me a little bit about how this all interplays in terms of the work you do and how you help people?
absolutely, Jen. I mean, in a nutshell, what I always try and focus on with what I do and how I help people is, what did I really, really need when I was younger, and what would have benefited me in such a positive way that I never got, because I was kind of on my own with it. I was very much in denial, and I just switched off completely with it. And I just think, well, what did I need when I was younger? And obviously, I go under the name the Diabetic Health Coach. And to me, health isn't just our diabetes management. Health is everything. Health is, something that's so important to billions of us. Like, without our health, what have we got? And when it comes down to health, that could be fitness, that could be our relationship with our diabetes, it could be our mindset, it could be our habits that we participate in every single day. And having that coach there who also has diabetes, I think, is such a big thing. And I mean, we've all been there, haven't we, where we've had someone working with us, or they've not got diabetes, and it's not the same, because unless you live with diabetes, you will never fully understand what it is like to live with. So within my coaching, I focus on helping my clients who have diabetes, like myself, to meet their health and fitness goals. I'm a qualified personal trainer, online coach, so I might get clients come to me and say, you know what, I'm really struggling to drop body fat, because I'm trying to manage my diabetes at the same time. It is so much harder. So that's where I'll help my clients with that side of things. Then I'll get clients who want to work on the mindset side to things, where they're really struggling to accept the diabetes, or they're really struggling to come out of bouts of denial, which I'm sure we've all been through from time to time. And that's where I'll help clients with building that positive relationship with the diabetes, because I genuinely believe that we can build that positive relationship with our diabetes. Um, and then also, there's an element of behavior change in there. I might have clients come to me who are in just really poor habits with their diabetes management or their health, and they want to build on their healthy behaviors and healthy habits. And again, there's a lot of the time we don't really get much support with that side to things generally anyway, because we have to we are kind of left to our own devices with all of the different things that we have to do every single day. And just with my own experience with my diabetes, so when I was a teenager and I was in a lot of unhealthy habits and unhealthy behaviors, just by making positive changes to those, I saw such a dramatic improvement in my diabetes management. I got into exercise, I got into healthier ways of living, making healthier food choices. I started moving more. I started to adhere to my medical regime. I started to check my glucose levels more. I started to change my Lancet. I started to do all the things that we just, sometimes can fall to the back burner a little bit. And by doing that, it helped me to manage my diabetes so much better. So, again, there's a lot of different things that I do. So, the best way to summarize it is either health and fitness goals, mindset goals, or diabetes related behavior change goals. And again, kind of having that person there who gets it. And even though obviously I help my clients with all of that, what my clients also like is just having that person at the end of the line who's like, "Do you know what, Vanessa, I'm having such a rubbish day today with my glucose levels." And I'm very open and honest. Like, I am not perfect. No one's got perfect diabetes control. I mean, if so anyone has got 100% time in range 24/7, then hats off to you, because that I can imagine is very, very difficult to maintain. Obviously, I know there's so much amazing technology now, which does make that a lot easier. But I think in reality, we're only human, we're doing the job of an organ, and we're not even, we're kind of just given leaflets or information thrown at us that we have to digest ourselves. It doesn't naturally come to us. And I think that's the thing with diabetes, it is a learning process. We have to learn about our condition and what we need to do. We have to learn about our body. And this is the thing I always say, there's 9 million people. This is not, I don't know if this is fact, but let's say there's 9 million people in the world with type 1 diabetes. There's also 9 million ways to manage it, because we're all so individual. Um, and it's up to us to learn about our bodies and learn about our own diabetes. And I always say never compare to anyone else, because everyone's journey is so different. Um, so yeah, I've kind of gone off on a big trail there, but that's basically what I do.
No, I think you've covered so much ground. There's so much in there, because when I think at the point of diagnosis for a lot of people, this is just so unknown. And understandably, the healthcare system are trying to help us to stay alive and take our insulin
Mhm.
doses and, you know, manage our glucose levels as best we can. But there is such a leap between like staying alive with type 1, being able to function, quote unquote function, and, you know, feeling well, and in your words, dominating diabetes. They
Mhm.
are worlds apart. So, and what you touched on there about that sense of kind of empowerment that actually came from you looking at your diabetes, looking at your health, looking at your body. Whereas I think for a lot of people, that's such an overwhelming place to look at if you are stuck, if you are feeling frustrated, to
Mhm.
begin from. So there's just so much in that. So let's paint a bit of a picture. If we take it back, as I said, you were diagnosed at the age of 3. So I assume that you don't remember a whole lot about that. Do you remember your, that's not, I don't know if that's a question. Do you remember your earliest diabetes memory? What is your earliest diabetes memory is probably a more accurate question.
Well, do you remember? Funnily enough, I've got a bit of a weird memory. I can remember my second birthday like it was yesterday.
Oh,
I've got a
wow.
really, I don't know how, but and I remember being in a cot. It's weird. Anyway,
Wow.
I do remember having excessive thirst. So I remember drinking a pint of water, then another pint of water, and a pint of orange juice, and then a pint of Coke, and it was just
Wow.
one after the other. And I do remember the thirst; it was horrendous. And I also remember being in the doctor's surgery and then being taken to hospital. But that's kind of like all I can remember really. Um, Again, like going back to when I was diagnosed. My mum and dad were brilliant. I mean, you're talking back to the 90s now. There was no CGMs, um, there was no well, there weren't even any, pens, like the pens that we have now. It was all syringes, injecting into an orange. I always remember my first insulin injection, the nurses had to hold me down because I was just adamant. I was like, "I'm not having it." As you can
Mm,
imagine, being a little girl. Um, so yeah, it was hard, and the thing is, there was the internet, but it wasn't as easily accessible back then. My mum and dad had to just liaise with my diabetes nurse, read, just gain as much knowledge as possible because, in a nutshell, they were becoming my pancreas, which is crazy to say, but that is the reality of parents with young kids with type 1 diabetes. Luckily now that obviously we've got access to so much amazing um, technology, and that makes it a lot easier. But back then it was, everything was it had to be done in a specific way. My mum, bless her, she did so much for me in terms of, like with my food, she'd weigh absolutely everything out to the P.
wow.
Like with every meal, she'd weigh it all out. They'd try and she'd try and figure out the carbohydrates. But again, there was no apps. It was all through books. It was all through, okay, if you have this much potato and this much bread, this is how much it is. And it's crazy because you think now with the actual solid quantitative numbers that we've got available to us, but back then there was nothing. It was literally a guesstimate. And I always say sometimes with our diabetes, and I think a lot of people can relate, when we guess, it is like trying to throw a dartboard blindfolded, throw a dart into a dartboard blindfolded.
Mm,
Um, so there was a lot of ups and downs. I was on mixed insulin back in the day, so I had it twice a day. And that meant I had to eat at regimented times. So in a way, it's funny because I actually think that the way that things had to be back then has actually made me quite consistent and routine now in a good way. Because we had to be back then, you had to eat at 10
mm.
o'clock a digestive biscuit, you had to have your lunch at a set time, you had to have your insulin at a set time. So in a way, I do think that there is a positive side to that, not only with diabetes, but with health and fitness behaviours. And, I'm going to get my walk in today because that's part of, a healthy habit of mine. And so sometimes it's always trying to get the negative and see the positive to it.
Yeah, I
Um,
sort of think a lot of the time I personally have to, otherwise I'll just kind of get swept under by all of it.
yeah, yeah,
And that,
absolutely.
I don't want to be toxically positive. I'm always very real about how much this tests me, but I can appreciate, certainly similar to you, knowing where we've come from in terms of just being in
Mm,
the dark with my glucose levels absolutely all the time, not having any clue. And there are pros and cons to that, I guess. Not knowing maybe makes you a bit less hyper fixated on it, but at what
yeah,
cost to my health? And you and I both had that in a way. So, I mean, that fixed regime that you speak of, and having to eat the digestive biscuit at 10, and I think mine was cereal bars at 10 and 3
yeah.
or 3:30, whatever. And never look at cereal bars in the same
I
way
know,
now. Do
I
you eat
know.
digestive
No,
biscuits
I
now?
won't touch them. No.
That's so
I
interesting.
did an Instagram post on this, and it was like the relationship that you have with the food that you were forced to eat as a child. Yeah, it's crazy looking back. But yeah, no, it's crazy looking back. I think in terms of just how everything's changed now. I mean, yeah, technology is amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
my Freestyle Libre, when I first started to use that, that was an absolute game changer because I always say it's kind of we've gone from only seeing snippets of our day to having our glasses. It's kind of people who need glasses really badly to then have the glasses put on and then being able to see clearly. It's that's the way I describe it. So yeah, it does make such a big difference.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk about the teenage years. I sort of mentioned in the introduction that there was a period of denial, and there was a certain period of time. I've seen from your incredibly powerful content online, you weren't checking your glucose levels, and in your words, you gave up caring and switched off from diabetes. So
Hmm.
can you talk to me a little bit about that time, like whether that crept up on you slowly, or it was a more conscious decision? I'm assuming it was just that you wanted to be like everyone else and not deal with it, which I know is
Mm,
such a common story. So do you mind speaking to me a little bit about that time?
yeah, of course. I mean, like I mentioned, when I was in primary school, my mum and dad were incredible. They helped me so much. They were my pancreas. So I didn't really need to think much about it because, I knew I needed insulin. I knew that there were certain things back then that I had to avoid. Not that have to avoid them, but it just made managing it back in the 90s and early noughties a little bit easier. Um, and then I hit high school. And it's funny because when I look back, it's crazy to say this, but I knew I had diabetes, but I didn't really know what it was. So it was kind of like I knew I had it. I knew I had to have insulin. Did I really understand the science behind it? Absolutely not. And this is where that denial piece and the thinking that I was invincible came in because I didn't understand the science behind it. I didn't understand where, well, if I do have prolonged high glucose levels for a long period of time, it is going to cause some damage later down the line. Um, and obviously, nobody, well, when I was at high school, I didn't know anybody with type 1 diabetes. I grew up not really knowing anyone. And because of that, I was able to switch off from it because I didn't need to think about it. It was only me that had it and didn't fully understand it anyway. So it was easy for me to want to switch off from. I found it very, at one point, I found it very aversive, obviously, with going to my diabetes appointments. I found that obviously because they they were never really fully happy with my HbA1c. I did feel, that in some of my appointments, like it was going into the head teacher's office. I would make up my results. I think we've all been there, haven't we, before going in
Mm,
and, just thinking, oh my gosh, I've not done this, I've not done that. But the thing is, like when you're a teenager, you don't have that kind of instant punishment. And this is the thing from a behavioural standpoint with type 1 diabetes. If we, for example, if we park on double yellows or get a parking ticket, we won't do that again because we've got a parking ticket. There's no instant punishment with diabetes when it comes to our glucose control. We feel high reading. It is what it is. I feel a bit thirsty, and I kind of got on with it, and I got used to those like feelings of being high, where it didn't really feel bad because I was so used to it. It's like my body just got used to being high. There was no instant punisher, whereas the punisher, well, it can't really, it's hard to class it as a punisher because it's got to happen straight after a behaviour, but it happens later on, and sometimes it's when there's like a delay in that punishment, we're less likely to make changes. So for me, it was like, I was getting away with, oh, I've missed my insulin by accident. Oh, well, it is what it is. It's fine. I wasn't really checking my glucose levels. Oh, I forgot to check my glucose levels. It's fine. It's fine. I'll just get on with what I'm doing. And then those habits just became prolonged habits. I was just doing it more often. There was no initial punisher apart from feeling a bit thirsty. It's like, oh, I can just get on with this. And I just fell into bad habits. Um, and I think you're in that kind of bubble anyway as a teenager where you're not really that bothered about health and, wellness. I know that's very different now, just with obviously it's all about health and fitness now with you younger teens, which I think is brilliant. I always think, wow, I wish it was like that when I was a teenager, because yeah, it definitely wasn't like that. So for me, I just fell into a complete state of denial where I was thinking, what? It is it what it is? It's only diabetes. I can manage this, I can still eat and drink what I want. I'm fine. Like, I feel fine. Um, and I got to the point where I didn't want to go to my appointments. My doctor, my endocrinologist said, Vanessa, she said, this will catch up with you. She said it may not be impacting you now, it's when you're older. Your body got memory and it'll catch up with you. And I was like, no, 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 it's fine. Like, it is what it is. But honestly, like, even now, like, I know my body so well, and I know that even now little things are starting to appear, and I know that it's probably got a lot to do with when I was younger. Um, yeah, so, and again, it is what it is. I've just kind of accepted that now. And I think this is a big part of diabetes that we're never fully helped that much with, is that art of acceptance. Like, for anything in terms of moving forward with anything, we've got to accept it first. And I think that's something that a lot of us struggle with when it comes to diabetes. And that's something that I didn't accept when I was younger. The only time I did accept it was when I got told that I'd potentially lose my sight before the age of 30. And like, I'll always remember. I mean, I think we all remember receiving our first retinopathy letter. It's like so traumatic because it's like capital letters, and it's like, oh my god. Um, and then I got a second one which also said maculopathy, and that's when I got referred to ophthalmology. And then that for me was just like, right, there's two things I can do. I can either switch off from it completely and just continue as I am, or I can do something about it. And I went with obviously that option where I was like, right, I'm not going to let diabetes stop me, and I'm going to do everything in my power to not let this beat me, because again, it is one of those where when it comes to type 1 diabetes, and as harsh as this sounds, it is literally like, imagine you've got a mole on your back. You know that it's not looking good. You know it's not, and it needs to come off. It needs to get checked, but you just think, it's fine. I'll leave it. It's fine. It's not there, and just ignore it. We ignore it. We keep ignoring it, and then to the point where it's then too late. So that's what I always think about it myself when I think about my type 1 diabetes. We can ignore it, but you don't want it to get to the point where it's then too late. And that's where that was the point with my diabetes, when I was like, right, no, I'm getting this removed. I'm getting it removed, and I'm going to do something about it. And then that's when I started to make not even like drastic changes, but I just made little changes. Like, I started to check my glucose levels more. I mean, this was before any of the CGMs came out, before I got access to my Freestyle Libre. Um, I started to write down my glucose levels. I checked them every hour, every couple of hours. I wrote them down. I highlighted them. So I had like all my highlighted greens or reds or yellows, and I could visually see what was going on. And in a way, it kind of starts to reinforce you when you start seeing more greens, and you start seeing what's going on. And again, sometimes with diabetes, we need to see some of those better days to reinforce the behaviours of what we're doing to carry on pushing forward. Um, so yeah, so it was a turning point. It really was, when I got told about the retinopathy and the maculopathy. And touch wood, it's not perfect, but to this day everything's stable. Um, but just because I've managed to keep obviously my A1C quite stable, but it doesn't mean I don't have bad days. Doesn't mean that I'm on point all the time. We all go through ups and downs, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a big thing to be faced with at such a young age. But I think whether people listening were diagnosed recently or a long time ago, there's so much in that I think resonates because of, like you say, this immediate payoff that we see versus this long term thinking as well that is much easier to push away because it isn't what we're dealing with right now, and that desire
Hmm.
to just live what you consider to be a normal life is, something that every young person wants. Do you remember the conversations you had with your family around that time when all of that was going on?
I remember, I remember crying to my partner. Um, so me and my partner, we've been together like 17 years now. So he's been with me through the in
Mm,
denial teenage years as well. And I always remember, just saying to him, "Oh my God, like I'm gonna like lose my sight," and I was just traumatized. I was like, I could not stop crying. And again, he was amazing at just calming me down and saying, "Right, well, you've just got to put a plan of action in place with what you're going to do moving forward. How are you going to beat it? How are you going to, not let it win?" And again, my mum and dad said the same thing. Um, again, growing up as a teenager, they understood, it's like it's always going to be the case when you're going through, puberty and teenagers, secondary school. It's a hard period of time for anyone, let alone a teenager living with type 1 diabetes. And I think sometimes we just need that shock tactic, which I always work really well off a shock tactic. If something happens and I'm shocked, that's what changes my behavior a lot of the time. Everyone's different. Some people don't need that shock tactic, but again, I always say like with our diabetes, the best thing that we can do, whether that like daily or just in general, is be as proactive as we possibly can. And it's that proactiveness that helps to push us along that diabetes journey, in a much more smoother way as well.
yeah, yeah. I mean, just to relate to your story, yeah, I can't remember what was said to me in the appointment, but I absolutely remember coming away thinking I was about to go blind. So it does
Mm,
make me think about the language use, because we do hear a lot now that, obviously language matters, and words like non-compliant aren't helpful. But much like you, that did shock me into action. So I really wonder what was said. And like you, touch wood, things are stable, but it is the reason that we're both sat here today. Um,
yeah, absolutely.
Without things like social media, where did you start to invest in this and seek out that information? Because much like you as well, I knew I obviously was living with type 1 diabetes, but I really didn't know what that meant. I didn't know that insulin was a hormone. I don't think any of that was ever explained to me. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I had no awareness of how far off course I'd gone. I don't feel
Hmm.
like I was consciously like ignoring it. All this language is quite clunky, so apologies if anyone is feeling a certain type of way, because this is sensitive and heavy stuff. But you know, I just ordered a bunch of textbooks and like went in a deep dive. I was obviously triggered into action in the way that you were, that kind of shock tactic. But with the wealth of information that's out there online now, like where did you begin and how did you begin to seek out that information? Because I don't think I then went back to my team to gather that.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, what I started to do was just obviously do some research online around just trying to learn that little bit more about it. And then I actually used to do a lot of volunteer work for Diabetes UK back in 2012, 2013. So I started to host, back then it was like Google Hangout. And I used to like host hangouts and like Zoom, kind of like Zoom calls with a big group of people with diabetes who would come on, and then we just all talk about all things diabetes. And I actually learned more from talking to others about it. And I learned that, the needles that I was using were far too big for what I needed, and
Right.
little things like that. But I learned that through speaking to others. I learned that, oh, actually, there's other insulins from Novorapid and Levemir that I didn't realize existed. And I think that's the thing, when it comes down to it, you actually learn more, not more, but you actually learn a lot from just speaking to other people about it.
Yeah, for sure. And at what point was it this kind of self exploration, need to learn about your own body and your own health that led you to the uni courses that you took, that led you down into psychology and behavioral analysis and things like that? Or was that slightly separate?
I mean, I've always been interested in psychology, so I always had a big interest in health psychology. Because again, obviously, it's such a big thing. I mean, I know I said to you before, like, diabetes in my mind is 50% physical, 50% mental, and but we're never really supported with that side to it. Um, and when it comes down to, yeah, because I was at college, so I did psychology at college as an A level, and then when I went to uni, I then did psychology, and then as I was doing psychology, I then got into behavioural psychology, and I was working as a behaviour therapist in kind of like a different area to diabetes at the time during uni, and then I went to do my masters in behaviour analysis, and then certified as a behavioural analyst myself, which I got certified in when I was 26. So it was kind of like, whereas within behavior analysis, it's a lot of child behavior, that kind of thing, human behavior. I wanted to kind of go down the route of, okay, what about the behavior? What about our behavior? Because the amount of habits that we have to undertake every single minute of the day to try and manage our diabetes, it's such a big thing. Um, so yeah, I've always had an interest, in that side of things. And then obviously I got into health and fitness myself. I got my own coach who didn't have diabetes, but I got my own coach, and I was like, they were brilliant. I learned a lot about just training and nutrition, and then I was like, do you know what? It would make such a big difference if they also had diabetes. And then that's kind of what led me to be like, okay, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to help people to meet those health, fitness, mindset related goals but from someone who also has diabetes as well. So yeah, kind of what led me to today.
Amazing. And when was the Diabetic Health Coach born? Like, how did you start to gather clients, and what did you start to see? Because up until this point, as you said, like, it'd been you, like an experiment of one on your own body. And now you had the professional training, and you'd also been speaking to people online with diabetes through Diabetes UK, and realizing that, you know, you were learning a lot from other people's experiences. So what did you start to find as you set up the business and started working with people that did have diabetes as well?
Yeah. I think like when it comes down to it, so I started officially coaching people about 9 years ago now. It's quite a while back. And funnily enough, my first ever client I still have to this day. She's still with me as like an
Oh
online
my
client.
gosh.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So she's still with me to this day. And when I when I kind of, started coaching, a lot of my clients, they were on their own with it really. They didn't really know anyone with it. They were feeling a little bit lost with the kind of management to it and understanding health and fitness. And this is the thing, like, how healthy habits in general, how they run alongside diabetes management is such a big thing. I mean, if you know what it's like at the weekend when we let our hair down, we go off the rails with food and drink or whatever it is, we're always going to struggle a little bit more on a heavy weekend compared to when we're in a good routine with eating habits in the week, and movement, exercise, etc. Sorry, my dog's drinking his water, if you can hear that in the background.
No, we love it.
um
Everyone's
uh,
welcome here.
so yeah, it's kind of one of those where I noticed that, wow, like, when we're in those healthier ways of living, it really does have a positive impact. Not saying that we shouldn't let our hair down and at the weekend, I absolutely do that, and I think we need to just enjoy life. That's what life's all about at the end of the day, but it's enjoying life with our diabetes coming along with us. Um, and yeah, I found that a lot of my clients just wanted to get into healthier habits. They wanted to feel supported. They wanted to feel like they had someone there to speak to as well. And I think that was always a big thing. And this is something that I always put like a big impact, a big emphasis on within my coaching program is communication. And within my coaching program, there's 3 pillars. So it's communication, community, and education. So communication being, as their coach, that's what I'm there for. I'm a message away. I like to be in regular contact with my clients. Community, I've got like a little WhatsApp group with all my clients in, which is brilliant because everyone just shares the good days and the bad days and has a good old moan about diabetes, which I think we need to have. Like that's the thing. It's not plain sailing all the time, and especially for us ladies as well. I mean, hormones. No one ever told me about hormones and how that's going to
Mm-mm.
impact my glucose levels. The only way I found that out was through my own research and speaking to other people. But it's like little things like that. What we never really know much about. So this links in with the education side of things where it's like, right, well, what did I wish I knew a little bit more about that I can educate my clients on? So um I like to do, like presentations, like PowerPoint presentations on different topics that a lot of my clients will get a lot of benefit from, whether it's mindset, whether it's health and fitness related teachings, whether it's nutrition, whether it's ways that we can work on building up our habits and our behaviors. And yeah, it's just a lot. When you think about it,
It's
there's
a
a lot
lot.
to it, isn't there, with diabetes?
This episode of Type 101 is sponsored by Insulet, the makers of Omnipod tube-free insulin pump therapy. I've personally used pod therapy to manage my type 1 diabetes for years, and using Omnipod 5 automated insulin delivery has improved my diabetes management significantly with less diabetes decisions and, of course, no multiple daily injections. How? Well, Omnipod 5 automatically adjusts my insulin every 5 minutes to help keep me in range, allowing life outside of type 1 diabetes to get bigger. If you want to find out more, head to omnipod.com. What in your mind is the kind of capacity for the relationship, or what is the differences in the relationship between someone who's seeking a coach and the healthcare professional? What's the line for you where you say, oh no, that's something that you should go to your diabetes team to? Because it strikes me that absolutely there's space for both. And more than that, it's actually really important that we have these pillars as well as the tools to manage the condition on a kind of base level.
Absolutely.
But for someone listening who hasn't really considered a coach, but maybe is thinking, actually, I want to feel a bit better about this, or I want to feel more empowered about this, or more accepting
Mm,
of this, or maybe it might be glucose level or health and fitness goals. How does that kind of coexist, if you like, with the healthcare
yeah,
team?
absolutely. I mean, like obviously, when it comes to our healthcare professionals, they're the healthcare professionals. Like I'm not a medical professional. I don't give any advice on insulin or anything like that. And everyone's diabetes is different. And that's the thing, like it's one of those where it's so important for, if anything, I try and push my clients to, make sure you're in regular contact with your medical team, make sure that you utilize what's available to you. Because again, it's like at the minute I'm having, like, with my glucose levels, I'm actually wondering whether to, because I'm on MDI, I'm wondering whether to split my basal dose or not. And I'm in kind of two minds at the minute. And this is something that I need advice from my medical team because, again, this isn't something that I understand myself. And this is why it's so important for us to, attend our appointments and make sure that we're consistent with them and, just gaining as much knowledge as, because that's the thing, we do learn a lot from our medical team. Everything that I know today is through what I've learned from my endo. And I think when it comes to, see, the best way to see a coach is like a fairy godmother on your shoulder. That's what a
Oh, I
lot of
love
my
it.
clients say. So they say, Vanessa, you look like my diabetic fairy godmother on my shoulder. It's kind of like, you're not here in front of me, but you're here on my shoulder, motivating me to keep going. And that's probably a good way to, if you think about coaching, it's that motivation, motivation to keep going. And obviously our healthcare teams are the ones who are there to, get us to that number or get us to that full understanding of what it is that we need to do.
Yeah, yeah, that makes so much sense. So, what's the kind of main trigger, if you like, that takes people from doing this, keeping on, if you like, and coming to work with you? What is it that people are looking to improve?
I mean, it depends really. I've got a lot of different clients who all have different goals. Like I say, some clients just want to feel better, feel stronger, drop a bit of body fat, build a bit of muscle. So there's that side to things. And then I have clients who come to me who just say, look, I'm just struggling to accept my diabetes. I'm struggling to even fully understand what I need to do moving forward to help to, just be the healthiest version possible. I have clients come to me who, they're struggling to be consistent with what it is that they know they need to do. And again, sometimes it's just having that person there to push them in that right direction and to help them to understand, what it is that's going to help. And sometimes just hearing from others what works. Like the amount of things that I've kind of found myself over the years and researched myself that have such a huge impact. Like I never realized how stress impacted my glucose levels. I was never told that that would have an impact. I knew that being unwell would impact it, but I never realised that, if I got up late in the morning and just rushed out the door, my glucose levels will shoot up 10
Mm-hmm.
millimole by 10 millimole just because of the stress of that. But I think sometimes when we surround ourselves with people with diabetes and, sometimes we have people break things down for us, it just helps us to process everything so much easier. So
Yeah.
yeah, everyone's goals are different. Again, some clients just need that extra support. Some clients just want to have a better relationship with the diabetes. Because I always say, like, I've got a relationship with it. It's a parrot on my shoulder that's always there, and sometimes it annoys me, and it's just do my head in. But sometimes I can get on with it, and it's having that relationship with it where it's that acceptance of, okay, there are going to be good days, there are going to be bad days. And and I know this, not to make this sound negative, but when I have a really good day, I always think, but it's not going to be like this all the time. So I'm having a good day, but this is great. Take away from that what I can and apply it to the next day. But it's also probably not going to be like this tomorrow. But that's okay because every day is just a different day when it comes to diabetes.
Yeah, yeah. I would be similar, like not to get stuck in the lows and how
Yeah,
that feels, but equally not to just rest in the kind of, I don't mean highs in high blood sugar, I mean highs as in successes. And I absolutely do celebrate the smallest of wins. I'm like, oh, lunch,
yeah,
nailed it. Yeah. But
yeah.
yeah, with that awareness, yeah, that this is ongoing. So with that, when there are so many elements to consider, where do you generally start with your clients? I know obviously it will be dependent on their goal, but does kind of a overhaul everything approach generally work, or is it kind of taking it piece by piece? Like, how does that work?
What I like to do with my clients is set longer term goals. So again, it all depends on what the goals are. I like to set longer term goals with my clients because there's a lot of research around like goal setting and how that can benefit behavior change in general. Especially when it comes to like fat loss or fitness goals. I always like to set goals with my clients where it could even be, let's say they feel a 1 out of 10 with the confidence with the diabetes. They want to get to a 9 out of 10. That is a goal. Like that is a goal to work towards. And a lot of people, they don't have a lot of confidence with it. They don't feel, like they've got that good relationship with it. So sometimes it is having something like set in stone to work towards. Um, so yeah, again, it all depends on what the goals are, and then I have weekly check-ins with my clients as well, so we monitor progress each week. I give feedback, and again, it's having that fairy godmother on your shoulder, overseeing everything, and giving some light into what they could do moving forward, and strategies that I've found have really helped me over the years. So I've kind of gone from one extreme to the other, and it's what's helped me along the way, and that could also help someone else as well.
Yeah. Okay. So when it comes to something like building confidence, what would you start with? Like, how would you go about building that up for someone from a 1 to a 9?
I think the main thing is we've always got to kind of see diabetes as something that we need to visually see. So just writing down what you're eating, looking at what's going on. Sometimes it can be as simple as us writing what our glucose level is before we eat something, what we've eaten, and what is it after. And then you can see it there in front of you. And that makes, so even though that might not seem like a big deal, it can make such a big difference when we actually see it in front of us. Because the thing is, it's easy for us to just switch off from everything, and setting little goals where it's, okay, well, what little mini goal can I incorporate each day that's going to really help me to build my confidence with my diabetes? So for me, I might make a goal where, give myself a little bit of a daily goal where I'm consciously, trying to make sure I pre-bolus, because that's something that I find definitely makes a huge difference. I might make sure that I, drink my 3 liters of water, because I was never told that if we're dehydrated, that can impact glucose levels. So it's just little things like that. It could be um, checking my levels a little bit more. I've got some clients who they don't use CGMs, and they're still using the usual finger prick, the meter, um, and they may only do it twice a day. Let's try and do that 4 times a day. Let's try and do that 6 times a day. Um, and again, so it just depends on each individual. Everyone is so different, but just by sometimes getting into better habits and seeing that these better habits have a positive impact. It might not even be, that our levels may not change that much, but the fact that we're actually taking the bull by the horns a little bit more, that improves confidence so much more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've said it before, but I think I thought diabetes needed to be separate from my life, because if I did
Mm-hmm.
let it into a big extent, that meant I like diabetes had won. But
Mm-hmm.
actually, when I did start to make a bit more of a conscious decision making approach and kind of allow my type 1 diabetes to take up more space, I was very empowered
Yeah.
by knowing that I was consciously taking steps to try and improve my health. And I didn't realize, like we were talking about it at the beginning, you just got used to being high with a high glucose level all the time, and that was your norm. I don't think I realized how bad I was actually feeling. Do you see that
Mm.
change in people when they start to make changes, that they realize, oh, I do feel better? Does that happen consciously, and does it happen quite quickly that people can see that this is kind of helping?
Yeah, I mean, the amount of messages that I get from people saying, I feel so much better in general, just because at the end of the day, when you think about it, when our levels are continuously high, it's not healthy for the body. But even though we never feel like that, we just think we can just get on with it, can't we? When you think about it, it isn't healthy. And is it any wonder we feel tired? Is it any wonder we feel thirsty? I mean, you look at pictures of me when I was a teenager, and I look older. Well, I don't think I do, but people say, "Oh my God, you look older when you were younger to what you do now," and I was like, "Really?" But again, I was just chronically very high all the time. Um, but yeah, I think that, in general, I think you kind of get to that point, don't you, anyway, when you're kind of in your 30s, and then it's all about health and wellness. The
Yeah.
20s are always a little bit different. But yeah, as you get into your 30s, it's all about the supplements, it's all about the sleep.
Oh my God, sleep. I could wax on about that in relation to my blood glucose levels forever.
Oh yeah.
Oh my
I
goodness
was never
me.
told
And
about that either as well, not
no,
getting
this
enough
is
sleep and
it.
how that can impact it.
I was just thinking there, you've touched on time of the month that
Mhm.
impacts glucose levels, stress, how that impacts glucose
Mhm.
levels, sleep, then pre-bolusing, all these little tiny things that you don't know if you don't know.
Mhm.
And these are like foundations for me now, but I
Mhm.
absolutely had no awareness of them. Are there
Yeah.
any others that you can think of that they have quite a big impact on a person with type 1 diabetes, but maybe we're not always informed about these
Mm.
kinds of things?
I mean, obviously, I'm not a medical professional. Everyone's diabetes is different.
Mm,
Anything that relate, obviously, like go through your medical team. For me personally, time of the month, hormones, stress, time of the day, sleep, how much sleep I've had the night before, um, illness obviously is a big one, pre-bolusing, activity, the different types of activity and how they impact my glucose levels. The time of the day that I exercise has a big impact.
mm.
Um, Hydration, again, if I'm not hydrated, that can have a big impact. Um, my sight is a big one. So people always say to me, "Why are you injecting in your arms?" I always inject in my arm, like not all the time, but that's usually where either that or my stomach. Um, my leg, I can inject in my leg, but I personally find that it does not absorb as well as what I do in my stomach and my arm. And I've trialed it because I have the same breakfast every morning. I love my omelette in the morning. Might change it up a little bit, but I know how it's going to impact my levels. And I'll pre-bolus the same time, but I'll change where I do it, and the results are completely different.
Wow,
And I
that's
can go
interesting.
back to doing it in my arm the next day, and my blood sugars will be absolutely fine. If I do it in my leg, it doesn't absorb as quickly. But again, that's just what I've personally found myself, and it's just through trial and error. And that's the thing with diabetes; it is literally trial and error every single day.
Yeah, and you
So
kind of have to make those little errors for yourself, don't you, to figure out, as you
yeah,
say, that your leg isn't as efficient for you as your arm, and it's so personal, and it is
yeah,
you. And yeah, I can understand, like, certainly why there's fear around that, because there are consequences to sort of changing things up.
yeah.
What would you say for to someone who's listening and thinking, okay, I do want to make some changes, but I don't want to give up my kind of joys in life, the things that I enjoy. And you mentioned it earlier that for you it is about balance, and I know you like to, going out on the weekend and things like that are important to you, and having a life that isn't just consumed by diabetes. For people who think that making these changes is going to kind of take over, and it sounds like a lot of work, and it sounds like something they maybe don't have time for, but they do want to adopt healthier habits, let's say, what would you say to someone who's in that situation?
I think like when it comes down to diabetes, it's not letting diabetes rule our lives. It's about being able to live our lives with diabetes along the way. So it's, you know, again, it's learning about our bodies, learning about what we need to do. And it doesn't mean that whenever we do, go out and let our hair down, that we just forget that we've got diabetes. It's not like that at all. It's learning about, okay, well, what proactively can I do to help with this? Like what changes can I make, or how can I prepare so that I can manage my levels as best I can in this situation. And I think it's that acceptance sometimes where, do you know what, they're not going to be perfect when we're eating out at a meal, because there's only so much that we can control. Nobody can track to a T what they're having when they're about to sit down for a meal, or no one can, pre-bolus on point when we're, just our meals plonked down in front of us. We're not going to wait while everyone else is just eating the meal. And sometimes I kind of allow myself don't ask me why I say this, but I call them spoons, and I give myself like 5 spoons a weekend. So it's like, if I've not got time to brew balls, right, that's one of the spoons. And yeah, I kind of allow it's like allowing yourself just to be a little bit more relaxed about it, because I take the 90-10 approach to diabetes, or the 80-20 approach. If 80% of my week I've been on point, I've tried my best, I allow myself 20% time where I'm just a bit more relaxed with it.
Yeah, you're making me think as well, like a lot of this we just kind of carry in our heads, and we see it dynamically moving in real time on our phones now with our CGMs and things. And you mentioned there about writing down and color coding and highlighting. I'm wondering if, like, taking it back to basics and visualizing things, because so much of it is just contained in this second brain that you mentioned. Whether that might be, is that something that you found helps certain clients, certain types of people, to break it
Yeah,
down so it isn't this big
absolutely.
thing that you're just kind of trying to keep juggling and in the air?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is why my clients quite enjoy writing things down weekly when they do the check-in, because sometimes we need to get off like how we feel, get out how we feel, and how our week's been, what has been, our wins for the week, what's been a struggle this week, or what do we want to improve on next week? Because that's the thing with diabetes, we are constantly just kind of always reviewing things day to day, and it is writing things down, which really does help. And then we can reflect on, okay, that's what I struggled with this week, so this is what I want to work on next week, because I know that by doing that, that'll help a lot. And uh, not even with diabetes, just with anything, if we, that's why journaling's brilliant, because we can reflect on what's gone well, what's not gone quite well, what can we change so that things will improve a little bit more for us next week, etc. So yeah, I think, I mean, I still write things down anyway. I'm like old school diary writing,
Yes.
highlighting everything. I write things down all the time.
I think it's kind of helpful to just touch on these different ways that you can approach this, because
Yeah.
I mean, for a long time, I only knew my way, and I didn't realize there were, like you said, 9 million other ways of managing this. So, yeah,
Mm.
it's fun to kind of play around with this and kind of articulate that. How do you personally um, maintain compassion and kindness to yourself when the numbers don't add up, as they inevitably don't always make sense?
I think, again, it's one of those where whenever I see numbers that I don't really want to see, again, acceptance plays a big role, where I accept that, not everything that I do is always going to be correct at that moment in time. And that's the thing with diabetes. It's never linear. It's never always going to be the same. And rather than switching off from it and ignoring it, and this is what I, try and teach a lot of my clients, is looking at that and thinking, right, okay, why has it gone up? This is the thing with our glucose levels. Whenever they go up, even though I might say, oh, there's no reason for it to go up, there is a reason. There's always going to be a reason. And sometimes that reason's in our control, sometimes it's out of our control. 10% of the time, it's out of my control: illness, stress, hormones. 90% of the time, it is in my control. And a lot of the time, it's just because I've done I've forgot something, or I might not have done something as consistently. But again, this is why reviewing that and thinking, right, okay, this is what I've done. I could have maybe pre-bolsed a bit sooner. I didn't quite track that to a T. I might have, like not really tracked the carbohydrates correctly there. Okay, I can learn from that and just move on to the next day. And I know for next time I have that to eat, or next time I do that exercise. And it's kind of accepting that every day is going to be a learning curve, and we'll always learn something from everything we do with our diabetes.
Yeah. And you've helped so many people, and as a reflection of your own experience, the fact that you took that and ran with it and not only changed your own life, but you've now changed the lives of so many other people is absolutely incredible. What sense of fulfillment and purpose does that personally give you? And can you also describe the change in your clients that you see when this starts to work, in terms of their perspective or their self-belief, what it offers them in terms of their quality of life outside of the numbers?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing with my clients is that confidence with the diabetes. And it doesn't mean, like, confidence doesn't equal amazing glucose levels. Confidence is feeling like they can grasp the diabetes and they can live the best life with diabetes alongside them. And again, it's that confidence and that feeling of, that they're doing the best. I think if we can go through the day and get to the end of the day and think, "Do you know what, I've tried my best and that is all I can do," then that's the thing. Because if when it comes to diabetes, again, there is no off switch from it, and we're never always going to feel fulfilled with it. There are going to be days where we're struggling, and a lot of my clients come away and just feel so much more in a better place with it, and meet so many other amazing people with diabetes as well. I think that's another big thing, because I put a big emphasis on the community side of things. And even if my clients come away and have learned one little thing to take into the future, then I've done my job there, because again, it's like, again, linking back with what did I need when I was younger? That's what I always try and think about, and think, how can I help others? Especially, if they're in a similar situation with what I was back then, because I really did struggle. I didn't even really know what it was. Um, so again, it's like, even just that little bit of an increase in confidence or control, or just overall better relationship with diabetes, and yeah, that's when I know that I've done my job.
Yeah. And you talk about dominating your diabetes in light
Mhm.
of, you're very clear that there's no such thing as perfection with type 1 diabetes. So what does dominating diabetes mean for you personally, having come as far as you have and experienced every emotion possible with type 1 diabetes?
I think when it comes down to dominating diabetes, it is living life to the absolute fullest, whatever that might be for each individual, and diabetes coming along the journey with us rather than stopping us doing anything along the way, and not letting it mentally take over, not letting it just be constantly in our thoughts, overriding everything else. And it's, again, just having it on the shoulder, as that parrot on the shoulder that you can get along with, but at the same time, you might have days which are tough, but it doesn't ruin your day or your week. And it's just kind of seeing it as a part of us, rather than, don't get me wrong. I mean, people say, what would it be like if you didn't have diabetes? And I think, well, I don't actually know, because it is literally all, it's such a big part of my life. And to be honest, like I always say to clients, when we look at the positives of diabetes, because there are positives to it, in a sense of, without my diabetes, I'd probably not be the healthiest version of myself.
Mm,
And I truly believe that, even though ironically I've got type 1 diabetes, I do think that I'm probably the healthiest version of myself compared to if I didn't have it. So, yeah, it's
yeah.
sometimes good to reflect on little things like that each time.
Absolutely, and acknowledging how much we're doing and celebrating how much we are investing in ourselves, no matter what the numbers say. I think, yeah, it's important, because we deserve to know that we're doing a good job, regardless, right? We're trying.
Yeah.
What would you go back and say to teenage Vanessa, who was struggling, who had given up caring and didn't want to do diabetes? What would you go back and say to her now?
I'd say keep going, and I would say diabetes will make you the strongest version of you. And yeah, it's a funny one. It's quite a big question, because there is a lot that I would say. I'd say just keep trying, just keep going, don't give up. But yeah, I think it's again. I always use that analogy when I work with a client as well. I think, imagine they were me back then. What would I say to me, and how would I want to help me?
Yeah, give them a big hug.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, where can people find you if they want to know more about you and the work that you're doing and how you can help people?
So I've got my Instagram page, which is Diabetic Health Coach on Instagram and Facebook. Also my website, www.diabetichealthcoach.co.uk. And yeah, I put quite a lot of content on social media, diabetes related, that a lot of people will be able to relate to.
Absolutely, I certainly can. I got a bit emotional there when you were talking about the teenage Vanessa. So I've got I've just been wiping
Oh,
away a little tear. But I just think, we are dealing with so much, and I hope this has offered comfort to people out there that you're not alone in this, that it can get better, that you're we're all trying, and we all deserve that hug that
yeah.
childhood us, adult diagnosis us, whoever it is, and wherever you're at with your type 1 diabetes. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I think it's incredibly powerful. And
thank you for being a fairy godmother to so many.
Ah. Oh, thank you for having me, Jen. It's been a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Type 1 on 1. Please remember that nothing you hear on this podcast should be taken as medical advice. I'm definitely not a healthcare professional. If you like what you hear, hit subscribe and do leave a little review on iTunes if you have time. It really helps to spread the word about type 1 diabetes. And thank you so much for listening.